First Sergeant Kep here with Company D, 2nd United States Sharpshooters, and thanks again for joining us. Today I want to talk to you about handwriting during the American Civil War. The Civil War's primary form of handwriting was known as Spencerian and was commonplace in the United States from about 1850 all the way until after World War I. Anyone who's looked at a copy of the Gettysburg Address will be instantly familiar with this form of writing. And I wanted to talk to you and sort of start a discussion and maybe inspire you to investigate this famous form of writing because I see it so overlooked in the hobby. I mean, definitely you don't want to have Farby handwriting, do you? But handwriting represents so much more than just sort of a style to represent during reenacting. It was a way of communicating. It was a common experience held by many Americans who had gone through some form of education. Spencerian writing was created by a man named Platt Rogers Spencer. And you can do all sorts of research about this man and how he made this writing probably the most popular form of American writing in history. Now, Spencer passed away in 1864. But his sons continued the legacy of their father's writing style and created the textbooks and workbooks that became common use for people in schools and in the workplace learning how to use the Spencerian script. So the Spencerian writing style wasn't only a matter of style, it was also practical use. And it made just as much attention to the body posture, arm posture, wrist posture, as it did to the style and forms of the letters themselves. So to get started, there are more resources available to you today than there have been in the past. Now, you have a couple of ways to go if you really want to experiment with Spencerian writing, or even if you would like to be competent and proficient in Spencerian writing. Obviously, having been published post-war, the copyright on the workbooks have long been overdue. So you can find electronic versions of the instructional booklet and the workbooks available for free on various places on the internet. But what I recommend is that you consider checking out Amazon, because on Amazon you can buy the theory book and the workbooks for roughly about $25. And I think there's something valuable about the experience of holding the books and working through them as someone would have done during the 19th century. And they're so affordable. If you need more practice pages, then it might make sense to print some extras off for free on the internet. The ones that I got from Amazon come with 6 books. The first book is the theory book. Now, this, if you don't know what to expect, this is going to seem really dry. But the theory book, you need to think of it like the teacher's manual, and it's not like an idiot's guide to fancy pants writing. So take your time and read it thoroughly and pay close attention to the way that you hold the pen and the way you keep your wrist up. And then I really want to discourage you after having read this and looking at all the beautiful alphabet letters and how to make them. I want to discourage you from just trying to copy the letters and the forms and trying to memorize the shapes, because you're missing half of the process and half of the instruction of Spencerian writing. It was about efficiency and comfort. And once you train your body, you build that muscle memory to hold the pen and sit properly and write according to the theory books. The Spencerian writing is very natural, especially when you're using the correct writing implement. I just use a basic wooden nib holder and a really fine nib. The Spencerian really prefers to have fine nibs. You definitely don't want any of those really wide calligraphy ones. These are two completely different worlds. So read the book and then start with book 1. And this is all about building muscle memory. This is a system of learning. And you can see on the first page, all you're doing is making hundreds of lines or strokes. And each succeeding page will have a little bit of instruction and more practice. And I really, don't cheat yourself. Take the time and work through the books. And towards the end, you will eventually get to more and more forms of, common forms of writing sentences. And by then, you would have trained your body so you would have much more fluid motion and a lot less frustration in the long run, because you've become more and more proficient with this style of writing. And Spencerian went out of fashion mostly because of technology. If you look through the way that cultures communicate through writing, the methods that they were using impacted the writing itself. So in the Western world, a common way to look at it is, we're all familiar with these old slanted writing desks. Well, why are they slanted? Well, it's because our writing implement was gravity fed. And by having a slanted desk and the posture, the writing posture meant that the gravity flow and the angles would provide a nice even ink flow as we continue to write. We dip and we continue. Now, after World War I, you see the widespread use of the typewriter as a method of business communication. You see more and more shorthand, and you see sort of the death of the fountain pen in the 20s and 30s. And as we get into the 40s and 50s, you start getting more and more of the ballpoint. And the ballpoint will write pretty much under any circumstance. And that's when you start to see the styles of cursive change. We print more, our desks get flatter, and a lot of the accoutrements that go along with written communication fade away. And now in a technological age where everything's through, some sort of electronic form of communication, that style and that sort of that relationship that humans have with written communication has gone away, and along with it, the art forms that go with the tools. So look up Spencerian penmanship and do some more of your own independent research and study. I think you'll find it fascinating, and I think it will allow you to interact more with the soldiers and people of the 19th century, because now you can also communicate in the same manner that they did. So let's talk a little bit about implements. So in Company D, we have an amazing company clerk who's spent lots of time in research making their desk as organized and period correct as possible. I prefer a wooden nib and a nib holder. You can get these at a variety of sutlers. I might try to remember to post a couple that we like down below. You can also find them sometimes at a decent craft or hobby store. You definitely want to stay away from any plastic ones. And sometimes you'll get a nice collection of nibs. Sometimes you can get a really good deal at an antique store, because you could also pick up an inkwell there. And sometimes you'll find an old, 80 or 100-year-old tin of original nibs. There are some ways, there are some thoughts about treating your nib to remove any of the finish from the manufacturing process. I've heard some professionals like to burn the end of their nib before they put it to work to remove any film, so they get a more even ink distribution as they write. But that brings us to the other important part, ink. So I don't like I don't use any of the calligraphy ink that you usually find at craft stores. It works, but in my opinion, it's too thick for what I like. So what I recommend is the period correct inks that you can get. A lot of the mix your own, the powders and stuff that you can get through sutlers. And those work well. I really like those. You have a lot of control over the viscosity and the depth of color that you can get when you mix your own. But what I've really fallen in love with is, since you're going to be on Amazon anyway, I just buy the fountain pen refill ink, and I really enjoy writing with this. And this might be And it's fairly affordable too, and you get a ton of it. This might be a practical way for you to go as you're learning. And then if you're going to be doing a lot of writing, say you're considering becoming a company clerk, or you are an officer who likes to do demonstrations at events, then you may want to consider a more period correct formulation of ink. But either way, I mean, once you take this out of this modern jar and put it into a period correct inkwell, no one would know the difference, and then you can maintain sort of the consistency of the way that you learn because you're keeping the ink the same. But with everything, you know, Company D, we're not about absolutes so much as we are about encouraging you to go out there and see what works for you in your world. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it's inspired future Spencerian writers. Thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll see you next time.